encased, like I was in a cocoon covering my whole body, and it was a blue light. Our Lady was standing next to me, and her arms were outstretched over my body, and the light was coming from her arms.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God, we see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, near-death experiences, God incidents, and today, visions. Visions of Mary and Jesus. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here today. This is such a great episode. I'm excited. And there's such a lesson in it as well.
I've got you on, you're on speakerphone.
You in your car?
I'm in my car.
Oh,
yeah.
Look at you. Look how high-tech we are. Just driving around in Australia.
Pretty good, isn't it?
There's Laura from Sydney, Australia. And if I were to say to you, what's the quickest, most effective way to get to Sydney, Australia? You would say, book a flight. Nonstop. Vroom, you're there. Done. If I were to say to you, what's the quickest, most effective way to connect with Jesus? You would say, pray to Jesus. He's right there. Nonstop. Boom. And I would say, no. Go through Mary. What? That's counterintuitive. I know that's always the first response. It's just counterintuitive. And yet if you read up on the canonized saints, read up on, say, Maximilian Kolbe or Padre Pio or John Paul II or Mother Teresa of Calcutta. They all went through Mary. Why? Why would you? Why? He's right there. Just go to Jesus. What's the Mary thing? Here's the concept for it, and it makes sense. Okay, I want something from Jesus. I want somebody to get a healing or whatever. So, okay, Jesus is right there in front of me, and I say, here's what I want, need, desire, and okay, here we go. And Jesus loves that. He loves that. Wonderful. I'm praying to Jesus. Great. However, I'm defective. My mind is not 100% pure. I'm so close, but I'm not 100% pure, right? I'm defective. I'm a sinner. We're all sinners. And when I go to Jesus, He takes that into account, of course. But I'm not completely right, if you know what I mean. But when I go to Mary, I ask Mary to intercede for me. Everything that comes from Mary, that goes to Jesus, that she takes to Jesus, is perfect. It has to be. It's coming out of Mary. Everything's been purified, perfected, magnified. She turns it into something better than I even said. You know what I mean? She's going to give it such perfection and therefore more power. So Jesus is going to be more powerful in my life. It's just, that's the way it works. Powerfully. Now, understand that? Okay, so now let's go to another situation. Let's say there's someone in your life and you're worried about their eternal soul. They're out there. Maybe it's son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter. And again, you go to Jesus because you want that person brought back in, right? Jesus, please, go get the one sheep. Leave the 99, go get the one. Go do it, right? Great. It's a wonderful prayer. However, again, go to Mary. When you go to Mary, that prayer is again purified. She takes all our ego out of it. She takes all of our imperfections out of it, our defective minds out of it. She's pure, perfect. She takes that prayer to Jesus. And then again, it becomes more powerful. And sometimes Jesus says to Mary, you go do it. You go, and that's what happens in this episode. A mother's prayers to Mary. Wow, what happens? A mother praying every day for that black sheep daughter to come back. Every day she took it to Mary, who took it to Jesus, and Jesus said, Mary, you do it. And you know what Mary did? She brought Jesus to Laura. I've read a few chapters of a book called The Mystical City of God. It's written by Maria de Jesus of Agreta in Spain. She lived in the 1600s. She's one of the uncorruptibles. What's that means? It means that when she was exhumed, her body was exhumed in 1909. Remember, she died in 1665. When they exhumed her body, she had not decayed. She hasn't decayed one bit. They've exhumed her since. Still no decay. I think the last time was around 1990 or so. Still no decay. It's like the day she was buried. Man, is God saying something when He won't let your body decay, saying this woman is so pure and so connected to me. He's shouting. He's making a statement, right? She had a number of experiences in her life, but Mary and Jesus appeared to her many, many times, and she wrote a book about Mary primarily called The Mystical City of God. In it, she talks about in matters of conversion, when Mary arrives on the scene, it gets really powerful. Here's the way she described it. She says, when Mary arrives, the demons fly away confused. Isn't that a great word? They have to get out of there. Their minds suddenly go bonkers. They have to get out of there. They're so uncomfortable. They fly away confused. Why confused? Because Mary's mind against a demon's mind, there's no competition. The mother of our Lord is going to win that one every time. She arrives on the scene, look out. Well, she arrives on the scene in the life of Laura in this episode. You'll hear the influence of demons in her life. You'll hear the answer to a prayer. And you'll hear Mary do what she always does when she arrives on the scene. She points to Jesus. Here's the story of Laura in Sydney. You've had an encounter yourself.
I have. I've had an incredible life-changing encounter with Our Lady and with Jesus, and it's transformed my life basically. Once she comes knocking, that's it. Like, forget it.
Yeah.
You belong to her after that.
All right. So what was your encounters?
I grew up in a very culturally Catholic Italian family. My parents, they believed in God, but they weren't regular churchgoers or anything like that. And but from the beginning, my mum always had a devotion to Our Lady, and my middle name is actually Assunta, which is named after the Assumption.
Laura is a twin. And we tend to think of twins as being so similar in all ways, but these two twins, they took two different paths. One, well, Laura called her twin sister a saint, and Laura knew that she wasn't, but when they were growing up, they had some similar experiences, including one particular babysitter. This was a fun babysitter. The things she brought into the house, like Ouija boards and tarot cards and the occult.
Opened up that whole New Age world to us and sort of made it seem really exciting and, something that we could, get magical powers from, and we were enchanted from the beginning. But the problem with that is that as we grew older, that stuff is so dangerous because it's so subtle and it lures you away from God in a really subtle way and opens a lot of doors. And by the time I was a teenager, I was living so far away from God that at one point I just said, well, I don't even believe there is a God, and I called myself an atheist. And by my late teens, I was getting into all sorts of troubles. I had I was sneaking out of the house. I was taking drugs. I had one boyfriend, a serious boyfriend, but we were doing things we probably shouldn't have been doing. And by the time I was 18, I had an abortion, which at the time didn't bother me at all. I had no conscience about it. I didn't care basically. And that's how my life sort of went on, plodding away, completely ignorant of all the damage I was doing to myself.
During all of this, Laura's mom, of course, is praying to Mary to intercede for her, to bring her daughter back. She knows Laura's not on the right path, and so she just keeps praying every night. She's got prayers for Laura. Well, when Laura was in her early 20s, Laura had an experience. She's sleeping. It's the middle of the night. And something wakes her up. Light. There's light in the room. She sees this gold light on her eyes.
It sort of brought me out of my sleep, and I thought, what is that light? And my instinct was to, get rid of it because it's waking me up. And as I opened my eyes, I sat up in bed and I saw what I can only describe as a globe, like a golden ball of light. Came in through my window, and it was sort of hovering around the foot of my bed, and I'm staring at this light thinking, I'm dreaming, right? This isn't happening. And I was punching myself and pinching myself and slapping my face because I was trying to convince myself that I was asleep, but I was actually awake. And I woke up the next day with bruises on my arm from where I pinched so hard. And the light sort of stopped moving, and it began to grow. And from within this ball, I saw the Virgin Mary standing. And even though the ball was at the foot of my bed and was close to me, her image inside the light was distant. That's the only way I can describe it. And I kept just saying, what am I seeing? What am I seeing? And she didn't speak to me, but she just raised her right hand and motioned for me to come to her. And when she did that, I was overcome with this sense of panic and urgency, and I realized what I was seeing, and I was so scared that I threw myself back into the bed and put the covers over my head, and I was sweating and shaking. And as soon as I did that, the light in my room, because my whole room was lit up, the light was gone.
Laura wasn't sure what to make of all that, but she thought her mom might have some input on it. So next morning she goes in the kitchen and mom's there and she's peeling potatoes, and she told her mom about what had happened. And surprisingly to Laura, mom wasn't surprised.
Laura, I'm praying for you to Our Lady every single day that you come back to God. And I just went, oh, well, stop doing that, because I don't want to have one of those experiences again. It scared me.
Her mom's comments had no effect on her. The events of the night had no effect on her. She continued down the same path. Nothing had changed. In fact, she says things really kind of got worse as time went on.
By the time I was 28, I had broken every commandment, and I just wasn't interested in God.
Then Laura meets a new guy. She likes this guy. She likes this guy a lot. She falls in love with this guy.
I finally had found the one I'd been searching for all my life, and I did fall deeply, deeply in love with this person, but it was a little bit flawed from the start. He and I sort of, we both did drugs, we both partied, we both did all those things that are culturally acceptable as a young person in your 20s in Australia, and I got into trouble again, and I had my second abortion, and again, didn't bother me, no conscience about it, just procedure, get it over and done with, get on with life.
And to go along with that, they broke up. And she always thought this was the guy. This was the guy she was going to marry. This was the guy she was going to have a family with. This was the happily ever after stuff. And it was over. And that devastated her. And she started getting more reflective about a lot of things in her life. She started looking at all the decisions that she had made and how those decisions had led to this point. And she just knew that she had made a lot of wrong decisions. And she just started looking at her life and even looking at her home. And she started making some changes.
Suddenly having the urge to just get rid of everything linked to the occult. And I went through the bookshelf. I threw out all my books. I threw out my tarot cards. I threw anything linked to any bad choice I've ever made. I threw it in a box and I got rid of it. And then I started searching for the Bible. And I found it.
What did that? I mean, why suddenly, boom, the occult is gone? What was the switch?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of the fact that my mum was still praying for me every day, and I think that through her prayers, I mean, a mother praying for her child is so powerful, and my mum's devotion to Our Lady for me would have been the thing that God allowed a grace in my heart for me to be moved to understand that that's where it all began. That's the only way I can explain it. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit. But I felt like that was what I needed to do. I just felt urged to do it.
The road back to God always begins with, I'm sorry.
I was sitting on my bed and I was crying a sea of tears and asking God to forgive me and going through every bad choice I'd ever made and howling, like I was literally howling and clutching this Bible and begging just for a moment for God to just take this heartache away from me, because it was there morning, noon and night. I couldn't escape this pain that I was feeling. And I don't think it was just the pain from the breakup. I think it was the pain that I had pushed down from those 2 children that I might have had that I basically aborted. I think it was the pain from all of the trauma that I'd been through, an explosion of all of that pent up stuff. And I begged God to intervene, and my prayer was, please just take this pain away. Please just take the pain away. And I fell asleep on my bed.
Laura sleeps for a few hours, and then again, she is awakened. Again, by a light.
When I opened my eyes, I was encased, and I can only describe it like I was in a cocoon covering my whole body, and it was a blue light. And I felt so at peace, like a peace you can't imagine. Multiply that by a zillion. I felt so peaceful and so filled with joy and so loved. And I realized, this all sort of came to me in the matter of seconds, but I realized that standing on the left side of me next to my bed, Our Lady was standing next to me, and her arms were outstretched over my body, and the light was coming from her arms. She was the one encasing me in this beautiful blue light. And I can still see she was sort of translucent. She wasn't like a full-bodied person, and I could see her mantle, her blue mantle, draped over the side of my bed. And then the very next second I realized that Jesus is standing at the foot of my bed, and I didn't see him from the face up. I saw him sort of from the chest down, and not, people describe him in all his glory in a white gown. That's not how he appeared to me. I saw him as Christ crucified, and I saw him, wounded and bloody, and the cloth that he wore when they put it on him, it was white, but when he appeared to me, it was scarlet red, and it was his blood. It was covered in his blood. That's what I understood straight away. And I also understood that I was seeing him like this because he was showing me that they were my sins that he took on the cross, that he took away. And it was such a profound experience. And I immediately started saying, you answered my prayer. You're real. Like, you came to me, in this little suburb in Sydney. You're in my room, and there's people all over the world being killed and tortured and have no food, and you're here answering my prayer. I just felt so loved. I think probably the whole thing lasted about 2 minutes, or maybe less than that. It seemed like a long time, but it was probably not. And my cat, she slept on my bed every night. She was asleep on my bed that night. She must have seen what was going on, because she was at my door scratching and hissing and trying to get out of the room. And I remember saying to Our Lady, "Oh, you've scared the cat. Can you calm her down? Because I know if I get up, this is going to go away." And she kept scratching and clawing and hissing. And so the second I moved a muscle, the whole thing was just gone.
Laura hasn't told many people this story. She knows what the reaction probably would be. She told her mom. Her mom certainly believes her. She told her sister. Yep, she believes her.
She was very, she went to church all the time. She was very strong in her faith, and she was always lecturing me and trying to pull me out of where I was in my life, and I was always telling her to get lost. We used to call her Saint Philomena, that's her name, because she was so holy all the time, and I was like the rebel twin, and she was the good one. And my sister used to say to me, "Well, why did it happen to you? Why can't I see her? I want to see her." And I said, "Because you're already a saint. Like, I'm the one who needed it. Remember, God came for sinners, and even if one of his sheep go astray, he really does stop and chase after them. He really does. And if you don't, he taps and taps and taps. And I can look back in my life and see all those moments where God was knocking and I didn't answer. I can see them clearly. And he just got to the point where he said, "All right, she's not listening to me. Mary, you go."
Yeah. Laura's sister then had a dream, and what the dream basically said was that Laura needed to travel to Medjugorje. And if you're not familiar, that's in Bosnia, what used to be Yugoslavia, because in 1981, Blessed Mother Mary appeared to 6 children. And ever since then, so many things have been going on there. Many miraculous things, and more apparitions of Mary, and the sun does amazing things. Anyway, so many people have had so many interesting experiences there. And her sister says, "You need to go. I'm telling you, you need to go."
And I'm like, "What are you talking about? What's that?"
So Laura goes. She travels over there, doesn't know anybody. She just goes.
What am I doing? This is crazy. Flying to the other side of the world, staying in a bed and breakfast with people I didn't know. From that point, it was like my conversion was like fast forward.
She did something she hadn't done in at least 18 years. She went to confession.
I confessed my abortions. I confessed every sin I could even remember remotely. I confessed everything, and I was in there for so long. And after that confession, I climbed Mount Križevac, and I said to God, "Okay, God, I'm here. You got me here. I didn't listen for years and years and years when you knocked, and so you sent your mother, and it worked. I'm here." And I said, "Let's make a deal. I'm in love with the person that I had broken up with. I want to be with that person, but I want everything or take it all away from me. I want no drugs, no partying, I want a wholesome life. I want to be married. I want to have children. I want to be with this person forever. And if you can't give me all of that, then take it all away so that I don't even want it anymore, and show me what you want.
You were talking about climbing that mountain. Is that the one with the crucifix on top?
Yes.
I have to tell
and
you.
I'll tell you
I'll tell you a story, and you tell me a story. Okay, I'll tell you mine first, just because. But on during my Blind Faith Live podcast, I talked to Samia Zoomout, who went over there, and she went up the wrong hill. She was up the wrong place. She wanted to go to Apparition Hill, and she's in the wrong place. She goes up there, and she sees this giant cross up there, and made out of concrete or whatever the heck is that. There's a nun up there and talks to her, and hey, we're supposed to be at such and such a place. Well, you're on the wrong mountain. You need to be over there. And so she heads on back down. But later it gets a little darker. And she looks up at that crucifix, and she sees it's all red. And in her mind she goes, "Oh, they light it up. They have some kind of lighting thing to make it all red." The next day, she hears some people going, "Did you see the miracle last night?" And it was like, "What miracle?" "Well, the cross, all red." "Yeah, we saw that. Isn't that the way it always is?" "No." Would you verify it's not red normally?
Oh, it's not red normally, and my story is so similar to that. And I can. So I was there with another lady in my group after Mass, and we were standing outside waiting for the rest of the group to gather, and looking up at that cross, the concrete cross on the top of that mountain, which, interestingly enough, there's a story about that we learnt. That cross was put there in 1933. I can't remember which pope it was at the time, but he had a dream. And in his dream, he was told that in this mountain, in this remote place in Bosnia, what had been Yugoslavia back then, he needed to put a cross there with a relic of the real cross underneath it. No reason as to why, but that's what he did. He had that cross built on that mountain, and inside that cross is a relic of the real cross that Saint Helena brought from Jerusalem to Rome. So that cross is pretty special, and that was back in 1933. It just shows you, and the apparitions didn't start until 1981. But anyway, we were looking at this cross, and we watched it. Her and I both saw it at the same time. We watched it spinning and pulsating and glowing before our eyes, and I was watching this, and I said, "Sylvia, do you see that?" And she said, "I was going to ask you the same thing." And then this weird cloud sort of went into the front of it, so we couldn't see it anymore. And when the cloud moved away, it wasn't a white cross any longer, and it wasn't spinning or pulsating. It was a tall, skinny, a little bit crooked wooden cross right before our eyes. And we just, there's no way to explain it other than we were given that grace, shown that beautiful miracle. But apparently it's very common.
Everything is common over there. What people see, and
anyone who ever doubts Medjugorje, I just say they've never been, because you see lines 50 people long of people waiting to go to confession, and many of those people like me for the first time in years returning to the church. The fruits of Medjugorje are so incredible. And for me personally, coming back here, changing my career, getting out of the world, and leading a prayer group. If you would have told me I was going to do that 20 years ago, I would have laughed at you. And that's because of that place, the graces that I received there. So, I'd say go there first before you judge it.
Oh, yeah.
And then that week that I was there, I had a series of really incredible dreams. And it was almost like the ghost of Christmas past showing me different things every night.
These dreams came complete with a guide each time. There was this guy, she never saw his face, she just saw his backpack and a cap, and he would take her places in these dreams. And the very first dream, he took her to what she assumed was either the lowest level of purgatory or it was hell, and he left her there.
And I was just surrounded by darkness, and around me were people in their own little world of suffering. Like there was a woman who was howling and rocking back and forward, and she was suffering so much. There was another person doing something, screaming, and then I saw people that I knew in my life in there, and I don't want to name them, but I saw the reason why they were there. There was one person who was there, and I saw him dealing drugs, and that's why he was there. And I heard a voice say to me, this is where you were going. So I got the understanding that before God intervened, this was my destiny. I would have ended up in this place, wherever it was. And I began to feel like I was suffocating, and I just needed to get out of this place. It was so dark and desolate. And then I saw in the distance a pin of light, and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I saw the person who guided me there. I saw his back, and he motioned, "Come on, this place is not for you." And in a moment I was whisked out of there, and I woke up, and I had the understanding that, that was the path I was on. That's where it led.
In dream number 2, the guy took her to her home. She's standing out in the driveway, her arms crossed, kind of impatient.
In the church where I was baptized, we have this big statue of Our Lady of Sorrows, and it's a beautiful statue. It's giant, and at Easter time they carry it in a procession on their shoulders. But I dreamed that my family was carrying her out of our house, and I was standing in the driveway with my arms crossed, going, "Oh, when is this going to be over? Come on, come on." And she looked down at me and made eye contact with me, and she didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes in that moment, it's like I had a mini illumination, and all of the sins that I had forgotten about, everything that I had done that made, I guess you can say, that I saw my soul when I was in that state of sin the way God would have seen it. And I felt so much shame. And fell to my knees and begged God for forgiveness. And the moment I did that, she smiled. So then I woke up, and I had this amazing grace of understanding my sin and knowing where I went wrong, and knowing what to say the next time I was in confession, things that I hadn't said, things that I had forgotten.
In the next dream, Mr. Backpack is walking towards Laura, but he's holding the hand of a little one. He's got about an 18-month-old little boy there.
Beautiful blonde hair. He was adorable. And as he got closer to me, I instantly knew that this little child was my soon-to-be husband's son. When we reunite and get married, this would be our firstborn child. It's like I knew that. I recognized him as my son, and I picked him up and I held him and I hugged him, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to meet you. I can't wait to meet you. I'll have a name picked out for you." And then the person said he has to go, and I put him down and I watched him walk away.
What a trip, huh? What a trip. All because her sister said, "You got to go." And because her mom's been praying, and things are happening in Laura's life. So Laura comes back to the U.S., and she connects with the old boyfriend again. And then another miracle, his conversion.
Within a year of me returning from Medjugorje, he was completely transformed spiritually. He stopped taking drugs. He literally just woke up one morning and said, "I'm never going to smoke another joint in my life," and never did, and never craved, and never, he didn't want to party anymore. He was just changed. And then he proposed to me, and I said yes. And then December that year, we got married in St. Mary's Cathedral in the city, which is very difficult to get a booking for. We managed to get one somehow. And we are now married with 2 children, and our firstborn child, Massimo, beautiful blonde-haired, and looked just like the little boy in my dream that I was told was going to be the first child of my husband and I when we reunited, and it's exactly what happened. So that's my story. It's basically it in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's just wow here. I tell you are a perfect example of why mothers, fathers keep praying for their kids. You really are.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you.
You are. You. I mean, because everybody has that family member, whether it's their kids or some brothers, sisters, whatever it is. Everyone has that where they go, I hope they make it. You're concerned because as you were shown, as the Fatima kids were shown, what torture looks like, what sadness and grieving and hell, or like you say, the lowest levels of purgatory, it looks pretty much the same, I imagine. Yeah. You got to see it.
Yeah, it's not nice.
And it's real. It's a real place.
It is a real place. And it terrifies me when I meet people who were me 20 years ago It terrifies me. And I walk around with a little purple book in my handbag, and every time I meet someone like that, I put their name in there and I take that to prayer, and I keep thinking, oh gosh, my load just keeps getting heavier and heavier. I have so many people to pray for, but those of us who can, we need to pray for everyone we meet, even if it's online, that don't believe that and don't know what lies ahead. The choices we make in this life determine where we spend eternity, and people don't realize that. But I would say to your listeners, like the biggest, if you take nothing else from my story, the one thing I would say is that there are a lot of people who in today's culture think that things like reading your star signs and tarot cards and playing with Ouija boards, even even little things like watching Harry Potter, they seem harmless. They do seem harmless, and if you're firm in your faith, they probably are, because you're not going to open any doors. But for most people, they are a really subtle seduction away from God, and people don't realize that. I have certain people who I know who still, they're prayerful people, but they're not firm in their faith, and they still do things like, oh, I'm this star sign, and my star sign said this is going to happen to me, and my cousin went to see a clairvoyant, and they're not realizing that they're opening all sorts of doors and inviting a whole world of trouble into their lives. Even in my family home, the stuff that was going on in that house, because my sister and I, when we were kids, had opened so many doors, there were oh gosh, there were all sorts of, I call them hauntings. My dad, would shrug them off, but there was some scary stuff happening. There were people who would refuse to come into the family house because when I opened the front door, they felt a wave of something not pleasant, and they'll go, I'll just wait in the driveway, and they would tell me later, there's something not right about your house. Like, I felt when you opened the door, I felt this like not a good feeling. I'm like, yeah, I know. It was through all those little, new age lies that we were seduced by, we opened all sorts of doors. So I would say, and when I had the apparition the second time, all of it stopped. Like, there was never, ever another rumble in that house. So pray for your children, and don't ever think that they're lost for good and just give up in prayer, because my mum never gave up on me. Night after night, year after year, she prayed for me. And look what happened. God is amazing.
Thanks, Laura. Laura from Sydney. Powerful, isn't it? Powerful. What's the takeaway? What is God saying in this? Or as I like to say, what's the conversation, right? What is God saying to us? Go to Mary. As counterintuitive as that seems, because Jesus is right there, why not just go to direct? And you can see why, because she purifies. She purifies. And in matters of conversion, the demons fly away confused. I love that. The demons fly away because there's no way they can handle what Mary can do as she brings Jesus to us. As she brings Jesus to us. And she brought Jesus right to Laura's bedside, the crucified Christ. Isn't that amazing? Oh, it's kind of interesting. I recorded that interview a week ago today, okay? And she mentioned that she was born on the feast day of the Visitation.
The Feast of the Visitation is when Mary went to see Elizabeth.
That was the first time that Mary brought Jesus to anybody. So today, here we are, and there's no coincidence in any of this, of course, is that as I tell you this, that feast day is tomorrow. Except with Laura listening in Sydney, Australia, hours ahead, Laura's probably hearing it on the feast day, which is tomorrow, but her today. So May 31st is that feast day of the Visitation. So happy birthday, Laura. Happy feast day. It will be on your birthday.
Wow.
The feast day.
That's amazing.
Of the Visitation. Nothing is by accident. Nothing is by accident. They're all touched by heaven moments. Have you noticed? And just a wonderful reminder to all of us that we just have to ask Mary to bring Jesus to us, and she will in a very special way. So thanks, Laura. Do you have a story? Let me know. Just go to touchedbyheaven.net. Shout out this week. Thanks for your support, Jane Silk. Thank you, Jane Silk, for supporting us. If you'd like to support us and what we do here, you can either go to this episode 60 at touchedbyheaven.net. You'll see Patreon, a patron link that'll take you there to help us out. Or you can go to patreon.com directly, patreon.com, and just search for Trapper Jack. Thank you for your support. Also, if I may ask, in your in your podcast app. You can rate and review the podcast. If you want to go in there and leave a review for us, that helps others find out. And if there's anything you could do for us, that's it right there. I thank you for listening. I thank you for sharing these episodes, and thank you for your stories at touchedbyheaven.net. This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. I will see you next week. I'm Trapper Jack.